Next up, we have Codman Marriott, who's the Managing Director of Western Mines Group.
Great, thanks very much, Joe, for that introduction, and thank you to Pader for the opportunity to present Western Mines today. Bit of a change of pace here. We're very much an early stage exploration company, so slightly different to the previous presenters. This presentation is available on our website, so you can read the disclaimer at your leisure. We listed Western Mines in July 2021, so just a little over 2 years old. We have 8 projects, all in WA, nickel and gold, of which our flagship project, Mulga Tank, has essentially been about 95% of our focus since IPO, where we think we're uncovering a very large Kmartite-hosted nickel system. We still have a very tight capital structure. We're very frugal and efficient with our exploration, so we haven't really needed to do any large capital raises since listing. Any capital raises we have done, directors and management have generally participated in them as well. So we still, the directors and the board are large owners of the company with a ballpark 12%. Our largest shareholder is a metals trader and resource fund out of Singapore. We think we're very tightly held and very leveraged to any exploration success. Now, some of this has already been covered by Matt, and I'm sure will be covered by lots of people today, but we think we have a very large low-grade nickel opportunity at Mulga Tank, and so part of my role is becoming increasingly evangelical about the role of large low-grade disseminated nickel projects in meeting some of this future supply gap. We know from nickel laterites, and as Matt talked about, Class 2, there's no point in chopping down large swathes of virgin rainforest to produce very CO2-intensive nickel. And whilst high-grade massive sulfides are obviously the holy grail here, the irony being massive sulfide deposits are generally quite small. But large low-grade deposits, like we think Mulga Tank is, these can host multi-million ton resources of contained nickel, have ability to supply sort of 30, 40, 50,000 tons a year of nickel for multiple years. Ben, our director, makes the analogy here of these being like nickel porphyries, if you like, and so there is huge economies of scale. You can mine low grade very, very cheaply for multiple years. Also has the added benefit of potential for being net zero carbon nickel that I'll talk to on a later slide. So we are out in the Eastern Yilgarn. Obviously, everyone in the room is probably familiar with this being a world-class province, particularly for Kmartite-hosted nickel. Examples being obviously the Kambalda Dome just south of Kalgoorlie, and up on the Agnew Lunar Belt there are sort of large hybrid deposits like Perseverance, and then those large low-grade deposits like Mount Keith, Yakabindi, West Jordan up there. So we're 2.5 hours east of Kalgoorlie, and getting out this way, you're on the edge of the Great Victoria Desert. So we're under 60 meters of sand cover, which is why this belt is very underexplored and why we sort of call this a frontier exploration project. But having said that, we're right, the Tropicana access road goes right through our project area, so we have very good access to quite a remote part of the world. We recently announced an acquisition yesterday where we've now consolidated. There's a tiny little bit of the belt that we didn't own, which we've now consolidated. So we have 100% of the Menigwal Greenstone Belt, about 425 square kilometers. And so just zooming in on this, as I say, we're under 60 meters of sand, so a lot of the interpretation of this comes from air mag. And what we think we have here is a very large, well-mineralized Kmartite nickel system. So down in the southern end there is a large dunite intrusion or subvolcanic sill. And this is where you would, very hot dynamic system where you would host things like Mount Keith or Perseverance. And then extending kind of another 15 kilometers up the belt is interpreted as being kind of more extrusive Kmartite channel flow system, more analogous to a Kambalda. So we think this has all the working requirements for a very large system that we've demonstrated. So if we just zoom in on that, that bottom section there, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. So the 2M members that we're looking for is either a Perseverance, more of a hybrid system, more of a basal massive sulfide of high grade, amenable, very high value deposit, amenable to deep underground mining. We're going to find that on the base of this complex, or potentially what we've found a lot of evidence for a very large low grade disseminated type 2 system like Mount Keith. So Mulga Tank was actually found by BHP in 1982. They did a large regional air mag survey over the eastern Yilgarn, found this huge mag anomaly and went and stuck a diamond hole right in the center of it. But they abandoned that hole after 200 meters because all they'd found was accumulate dunite with nickel sulfides. And they were looking for Olympic Dam ICG, so it didn't fit the model. By the time we acquired the project ahead of the IPO in 2020, there'd only actually been 12 holes into this. But of those 12 holes, 10 of them showed nickel sulfide, either in core or also validated in thin section. Subsequent to that, over the last 18 months, we've put another 17 holes in here. We've deliberately tried to sort of spread it more around the intrusion. We've been a little bit biased towards the western side, where we see a very large EM anomaly that I'll talk to later, and where we think there's a very interesting environment where potentially this intrusive dunite, there's some extrusive vent into these komatiite channels. Of the 17 holes that we've drilled, 13 of them have come back with visible nickel sulfide mineralization. So again, continuing the hit rate here. And there's almost no bad holes into this. We're drilling over something like a 20 square kilometer area and seeing extensive nickel sulfide mineralization around the place. I forgot to mention that I like to use Mount Keith just on the left-hand side there as a sort of a scale bar for the size of our intrusion. So we embarked on our first drilling program starting in April last year. We drilled 11 diamond holes, and towards the end of that, hole 20, which was actually a follow-up hole to hole 11. The project was previously owned by Impact Minerals, and after lunch with Mike Jones, he let us know that his favorite hole had been hole 11 here. So we went back and looked at the database, and he was right. 4 of the top 10 intersections of the whole project were in that one hole. So we drilled hole 20 on the right-hand side there, underneath that. And this is the first instance where we saw 300 meters of disseminated nickel mineralization. From the geochemical signatures and the logging, we actually went back and looked at one of our first holes, 12, and realized we'd missed a bit of disseminated mineralization in the top of that. We came back in November last year, and we started to step in from that western margin, and we drilled hole 22, and again, about 350 meters of disseminated mineralization, of which, confirmed by assay results, of which there's a very nice sort of shallow top section there going about 114 meters at 0.31% nickel. During that time, we'd applied for an EIS grant, so in order to fund 2 deep holes into this, so we could start to get braver and step out right into the center of this large bowl-shaped body. And we drilled hole 23, which came back with over close to 700 meters of disseminated nickel sulfide mineralization. And then our second EIS hole was 26, and this was, at the time, the best one to date, with 900 meters of visible mineralization confirmed by assay. And then we've just announced this morning the assay results for hole 27, which was something of a wildcat hole right on the eastern side there, where no previous drilling. We anticipated this hole might go to about 800 meters deep, but ended up, we had to have drill it to 1,600 to get to the bottom of this thing. But that we put out this morning, these are the best results to date of 700 meters of, cumulatively 700 meters of mineralization at about 0.31% nickel, of which towards the base of that there's a very nice intersection which we could be getting close to sort of Perseverance style sort of cloud sulfide of nearly 100 meters at 0.4, of which there's some higher grade zones of well over 1%. So these 3 deep holes certainly have very much sort of started to unlock our understanding of Mulga Tank, and we think there's definitely very clear evidence of a large sort of Mount Keith style disseminated system here. And some of that mineralization is occurring very, very close to surface. We've done various mineralogical studies, and the sulfide blebs that we're seeing in thin section, it's nearly all just pure pentlandite. We don't see much other sort of sulfide species. And whereas Mount Keith, you might see 0.35, 0.4% material with no visible sulfides here, anything above about 0.25, we're seeing very nice, visible sulfide blebs in between olivine grains, and hopefully, if you can see it, you can recover it. So this is kind of, now having stepped right across the thing, this is what this thing looks like. It's quite a huge, well-mineralized body. But just across the top of this thing, within the top couple of 100 meters of surface, we've got about 60 meters of sand. We drill through, there's not much oxidized rock, we drill into fresh rock, and generally all across this, At about 110 to 120 meters, bang, the sulfides start to kick in within the drill core. So just in that top section between these holes, we've kind of proved this zone over about 2.3 kilometers, and now with the results of hole 27, we've stepped that out another kilometer. So over about 3.2 kilometers within the top 250 meters of surface, we seem to have a very sort of first flat-lying zone of mineralization. We've done some pretty rudimentary sort of aqua regia studies on this, with aqua regia being a less aggressive digest to just dissolve the sulfide, and versus the 4-acid results dissolving the entire rock. It's not fair to say that that's a recovery or that's a liberation, but we certainly get very high correlation in the results of better than 97%. So we think predominantly a lot of this nickel is certainly in sulfide. But we don't just think this is a Mount Keith style. We think this is probably more analogous to a Perseverance and more likely to be a hybrid system, because in a lot of these holes, initially on the western margin above that very large EM anomaly, we see lots of occurrences of sort of remobilized massive sulfide within sort of faults and fractures within the rock, small sort of veinlets, maybe 2, 5, 10 centimeters, stuffed full of some very high-grade material. You can't really sort of see that when we assay it over, a 3-centimeter vein, and we assay it over 0.5 meter, but it's still coming back with lots of 1 to 2% numbers of this veinlet mineralization. And even in hole 27 towards the eastern side there, we're starting to see kind of larger immiscible globules, which is maybe a sort of an intermediate step between this disseminated coalescing, gravity starting to act on it, and it to settle out to basal deposits. So we think somewhere in here there's probably potential for multiple sort of Perseverance style deposits. I've now changed and I'm using sort of Perseverance as a scale bar there on the left-hand side. So we're drilling holes 1.5 kilometers apart, hoping to hit something that's only about 500 meters by 100 meters. So we need to better improve our targeting work, but we certainly see a lot of it throughout the system. And then just to note that from extending out again from this, there's 15 kilometers of what's interpreted as komatiite channels. There was a little piece of this komatiite system we didn't own. We've recently consolidated that in a nice, cheap acquisition. And just at the neck there of the intrusion in what's called the panhandle, you very much start to come into more komatiite. This is more extrusive. There's the classic A and B zones, and there's a couple of drill intersections there. A historic impact one of, again, some thin material going the best part of 4% nickel with copper and PGEs. We drilled, again, tried to test underneath that and came back and found that same material. But there's 15 kilometers of very fertile komatiite channels here that are sort of completely untested. We recently flew back in August a large mobile MT survey over the entire belt, and we're working on the results of that through 3D inversion to start targeting this a lot more. So where to from here? A couple of weeks ago, a second rig came to site, and we've started to drill some shallow RC holes. We have 18 holes planned on about a 500 by 300 meter grid, covering something like 2 kilometers by 1 kilometer in the center of this area. That's not going to get us to resource, but we hope it might get us to some sort of exploration target level. You can do rough numbers on that, and there's probably 2 million tons of contained nickel just in that top 250 meter section without even thinking about the rest of the body. And then, as I said, we're waiting on the results of our mobile MT survey. This is airborne magnitude tellurics, deep resistivity mapping. We hope that this might give us some better 3D modeling of this dunite, along with our 3D gravity and our 3D mag inversions and all the rest of it, to start potentially targeting either zones of richer disseminated or hopefully some massive sulfide targets at depth as well. Just a nod to our green credentials. We noticed that the core, this very high MgO ultramafic dunite, when it comes to surface, within a couple of weeks the core starts spalling or cracking as it's spontaneously carbonating, it's absorbing carbon dioxide. And the minerals sort of that related to that are brucite and various hydrotalcite minerals. So we've done some XRD work to confirm the presence of those, and these are the minerals responsible for the same thing at Mount Keith, which absorbs about 40,000 tons a year of CO2 in its mine tailings. So with the presence of this in the rock, we have the ability to potentially be a net zero carbon nickel producer on a very large scale here in here in WA. So just in terms of levers to sort of shareholder value over the next 6 to 12 months, we very much think about this in terms of our sort of 3 mineralization styles. The Mount Keith style, I think we've certainly proved a large disseminated system. We're going to drill out this RC over the next sort of month or two, hope to come up with an exploration target of hopefully a couple of million tons of contained nickel. The mobile MT work will then lead into further deep diamond drilling, looking to target some of these more basal massive sulfide deposits. And then, having just completed this acquisition, also we're waiting on the grant of the Northern Tenement 2299, which we expect in a month or two. That'll allow us to go after these completely unexplored Kambalda-style channels, which will be the first drilling of those. So just in summary and something of our philosophy, we think there's the opportunity to find multiple significant nickel deposits here at Mulga Tank. We always strive to do very high quality technical work. We're very frugal with our exploration work, trying to be as efficient as we can, because the board and directors are significant shareholders in this, and we don't want to dilute ourselves. We're trying to change all our shareholders' lives through making significant discoveries. Come and see us at booth 30. Thank you very much.